My name's Peter, I'm 29, and I've always been the kind of guy who keeps his head down and tries not to cause waves, especially when it comes to family. Not because I'm spineless or anything, but because the moment you say something even slightly critical, it somehow turns into, why are you making things awkward? Or worse, you know how your cousin gets. Just ignore it. But ignoring things only works until it doesn't. And in my case, that doesn't came at a banquet where I learned, in real time, how disposable I was to the people I'd spent years trying to keep peace with. The story really starts about 2 months before my cousin Hannah's 25th birthday banquet. She's the golden child in the family, charming, photogenic, and always at the center of every group photo. You know the type. Whenever there's a wedding or some kind of gathering, she's the one getting ready in the center of the house while the rest of us are scrambling to help set things up in the background. Growing up, she and I were never super close, mostly because I was the quiet cousin, and she made it clear early on that I didn't fit into whatever clique she was trying to create within the family. My mom, bless her heart, still pushed me to make an effort with Hannah over the years. I tried. I really did. I went to her graduation party, even though I had work the next morning. I helped her brother move apartments when none of her friends showed up. I even lent her money once when she lost her job for a couple months. Not that she ever brought it up again. Not that I expected her to. But it does give you a certain lens when someone treats you like you're invisible afterward. Anyway, Hannah's birthday banquet was supposed to be this big, fancy, sit-down dinner at one of those restaurants where they carve meat at your table and have actual cloth napkins instead of the paper kind folded into triangles. My aunt, the host and unofficial PR manager of the family, had sent out these eveets that looked like they were made by a wedding planner. Formal attire. Dinner provided. Come ready to celebrate our shining star. Or something equally saccharine. I wasn't sure I even wanted to go, but my girlfriend Eliza nudged me toward it. She's one of those people who believes in giving people the benefit of the doubt, probably why she's still with me despite how much drama my family can be. So I RSVP'd, yes +1. I even went out and bought a new dress shirt because Eliza said my usual one looked too funeral, not enough birthday. We arrived at the venue about 15 minutes early, which is apparently a rookie mistake because the birthday girl wasn't even there yet. Just my aunt fluttering around the tables like a stressed-out wedding planner. The moment she saw me, her face lit up in that artificial way people do when they weren't expecting to see you and now have to rearrange something. "Oh, Peter," she said, her voice climbing into that uncomfortable octave people use when they're about to pretend something isn't a problem. "I didn't realize you were bringing someone. I put it on the RSVP," I said casually, gesturing to Eliza beside me. "This is Eliza. We've been together a little over a year." Eliza smiled and extended her hand. My aunt hesitated, then gave a quick shake like she was touching something sticky. "Right? Yes. Lovely to meet you. You too can find a spot wherever. The dinner starts soon." That's when I noticed the long rectangular table at the center of the room, set with fancier glassware, personalized name cards, and little white roses in tiny vases. The family table. I glanced over and saw names written in gold cursive. Hannah, Aunt May, Uncle Derek, even Hannah's boyfriend Brandon, who I knew for a fact had only been around 6 months. My name wasn't on there. Neither was Eliza's. In fact, there was no extra space at all. "Should we just sit over there?" Eliza asked gently, motioning to the side tables near the wall. I was about to nod when Hannah breezed into the room wearing a floor-length red dress like she was about to accept a Grammy. Her eyes landed on me and curved into a smirk that I've known since childhood. She walked over, air-kissed the air near my cheek, then turned to Eliza with a forced grin. "And you must be the +1, she said, emphasizing it just enough to make it sting. "Eliza," my girlfriend replied, still polite. Hannah turned back to me. "So glad you could make it. We didn't have a card for you at the head table, but feel free to grab a seat wherever. We try to keep it just family, you know." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and led Eliza toward a 2-person table tucked near the bar, as far from the action as you could get without being physically in the kitchen. I wasn't angry yet, just embarrassed. The kind of slow-burning embarrassment that starts in your chest and moves outward until your face feels hot and you wonder if anyone else noticed. I didn't even want to look at the rest of the room. I just focused on Eliza, who was trying to make the best of it. "This is nice," she said softly, unfolding her napkin. "We've got a good view of the bartender." I laughed. mostly because it was easier than saying how humiliated I felt. As dinner was served, I noticed the waiter going table by table, delivering plated meals. When he reached us, he paused. "Sorry," he said with a confused frown. "I just want to double-check. Are you two part of the family group?" Before I could answer, Eliza stepped in with a calm smile and said, "We're not part of that group." "They are." She gestured toward the head table with her chin. The waiter glanced back, nodded, and gave us two plain grilled chicken plates. No appetizers, no dessert options like the others were getting. It was like we were on the budget version of the party, and everyone else got the premium package. That's when it really started to sink in. I wasn't just seated at a different table. I wasn't just overlooked. I was intentionally excluded. After everything, after years of bending over backward for this family, of staying quiet, of showing up when I didn't want to, I was treated like I was barely even a guest. Like I was lucky to have a chair at all. But the real kicker didn't come until the very end of the night, when the check came. The waiter returned with a leather folder and asked, politely, "Who should I bring this to?" He was standing right in front of me. Hannah looked up from the head table, saw the folder in his hand, and didn't even blink. Before I could respond, Eliza reached out gently and said again, "Oh, we're not part of that group. They're the hosts." Her tone was still calm, but there was something steelier in her eyes now. The waiter looked surprised, then nodded and walked away toward my aunt and Hannah, who both shot glances in our direction like we'd done something uncivilized. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But something in me, something I didn't even know was still awake, started quietly rising to the surface. I didn't sleep much after the banquet. I kept replaying it in my head. Each awkward glance, every dismissive word, the waiter's hesitation, Hannah's smirk. But what haunted me the most wasn't any single moment. It was the collective weight of everything I'd brushed off for years. All the small slights that I convinced myself weren't worth making a fuss over. Turns out, ignoring enough paper cuts doesn't make them disappear. It just means you eventually bleed out without realizing it. Eliza tried to cheer me up the next day. She made breakfast, cracked a few jokes about the chicken prison plate we got, and told me she was proud of me for staying composed. I appreciated it, but I was quiet. Not cold, just distant. I wasn't angry anymore. Something worse had settled in my chest. Clarity. I couldn't unsee what I saw, couldn't unhear what was said, and I couldn't keep pretending I was part of a family that only saw me as filler for a guest list. But clarity is a dangerous thing. Once you have it, you start seeing patterns everywhere. Like how every group photo from the banquet that got posted on Facebook had everyone tagged, except me. Even Eliza was tagged. But not me. I stared at one of the photos for a solid minute. Me, blurry in the background by the bar, while everyone else posed with fake champagne flutes and wide smiles at the family table. It looked like I'd photobombed a stranger's celebration. I didn't comment. I didn't message Hannah. I didn't even like the post. But I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I started paying attention. The next few weeks, I started noticing how often this kind of thing happened. Not just with Hannah, but with my entire extended family. Every family group chat, I was either ignored or looped in as an afterthought. My uncle hosted a barbecue and said it was just the cousins, but didn't invite me. My aunt posted a throwback Thursday of all the grandkids at the lake house one summer, cropped me out completely. And when I texted my mom about it, she replied with, "Don't take things so personally, Peter. You know how they are." That phrase, "you know how they are," I'd heard it all my life. It was the excuse for everything. The reason why I had to keep swallowing my feelings. You know how they are meant you're not allowed to be upset. Not unless you wanted to be the problem. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, when my mom invited me to Sunday dinner at her place. Said it would be a small gathering, just family. I figured it'd be nice to spend time with her without all the others. And Eliza, always supportive, agreed to come with me. We arrived early, brought dessert. Eliza made this layered berry trifle thing that looked like it belonged in a cooking show. My mom seemed happy to see us. She hugged me, complimented Eliza, told us to make ourselves comfortable. It felt normal, almost like how things used to feel before I got old enough to notice the hierarchy. Then the doorbell rang. And again, and again. Over the next half hour, in walked Hannah, her boyfriend Brandon, Uncle Derek, Aunt May, and, of course, my cousin Riley, the other golden child who somehow managed to be both unemployed and condescending at the same time. One by one, they breezed in like royalty, arriving fashionably late to their own gala. Oh, I muttered under my breath. So much for a small gathering. Eliza squeezed my hand under the table. I could already feel the storm brewing behind her polite smile. Dinner was awkward from the jump. My mom had arranged the seating so that Hannah and Riley sat directly in front of each other, both flanked by their parents, while Eliza and I were off to the side again. Not the kiddie table this time, but definitely not the center of attention. Conversations flowed over us like we weren't even there. Hannah talked about how she might move to New York because LA is getting too basic, and Riley bragged about some new crypto app he was advising for. Brandon chimed in occasionally, usually just to say something like, "Facts," or "That's crazy, bro," and then went back to scrolling on his phone. When Eliza tried to ask a question, something harmless, like, "What's the app called?" Riley looked at her like she'd spoken out of turn and mumbled, "It's kind of insider stuff. Probably wouldn't be interesting." I watched Eliza blink twice, set her fork down, and say nothing. I felt a shift in my gut. Not anger. Not yet. Just shame. For bringing her into this. For exposing her to the same treatment I'd endured for years and convincing myself it wasn't that bad. Dessert came out. Everyone oohed and awed over the store-bought cake my aunt brought. Nobody touched the trifle Eliza made. My mom didn't even set it on the main table. She left it on the counter like it was a backup, just in case the real dessert ran out. "Guess I'll take it home," Eliza whispered, smiling through it. After dinner, people started lounging in the living room. I stood up, offered to help clear plates, just to get some space. As I was in the kitchen rinsing a few dishes, I heard Hannah's voice behind me. Quiet enough that she probably thought I couldn't hear, but loud enough to be heard if I was paying attention. "Peter always brings these serious girlfriends who think they're part of the family. Then they break up and we never see them again." My heart didn't drop. It stopped. Laughter followed. Someone, Riley, maybe, added, "He treats every girl like she's the one." It's kinda sad. They weren't whispering. They weren't even hiding it. They were just saying it. Like it was normal. Like I wasn't just a joke to them, but a predictable one. I turned around and locked eyes with Eliza, who had frozen halfway to the living room with 2 mugs of tea in her hands. She'd heard it too. We didn't say anything. I walked over, took one of the mugs from her, and said, "Let's head out." "Oh," my mom called from the other room. "You guys don't have to go yet." But her voice was hollow, empty of anything that made me believe she actually wanted us to stay. Outside, Eliza didn't cry. She didn't rant. She just got in the car, pulled the door closed, and let out a single, controlled breath. I sat beside her, staring at the dashboard. For once, I had no words. Then she said, softly, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I get it now. I finally get why you always flinch when the word family comes up." That was the moment it all clicked. All the years of defending them. All the times I told myself they don't mean it, or it's just how they are, or at least they're still family. That moment broke whatever rope I'd been clinging to, frayed and useless, convincing myself it was worth the climb. I was done. Done waiting for their approval. Done showing up out of guilt. Done letting them define where I stood. But as it turns out, I wasn't the only one with a line in the sand. 2 days later, I got a group text from Aunt May. "Hey everyone, just a reminder, Hannah's having a second celebration dinner this Friday, more intimate. Only inviting real family this time. No plus ones, please. Thanks." It was addressed to everyone, including me. A minute later, Eliza leaned over from her side of the couch and showed me her phone. Hannah had sent her a separate message. "Hey, nothing personal, just trying to keep this small. Hope you understand." I stared at both messages for a long, long time. And that's when I realized. They didn't just exclude me. They expected me to show up anyway. To sit there, quiet, alone, like some loyal, obedient stand-in they could mock when I wasn't listening, then parade around when they needed to fill a seat. They didn't know it yet, but this time, I was listening. I didn't respond to the message. Not to Aunt May's group text, not to Hannah's private invitation, and not even to my mom when she called 2 days later to ask why I hadn't RSVP'd. I just let it sit there. A digital silence I knew they wouldn't understand. For people so obsessed with appearances and hierarchy, silence was chaos. And I wasn't ready to give them peace. The night of the intimate family dinner, I stayed home with Eliza. We ordered Thai, watched a bad comedy, and didn't talk about it. I mean, not directly. But every laugh that came a beat too late, every glance that lingered, said what we were both thinking. This wasn't just a one-time insult. It was a pattern I'd let take root, and I was finally ripping it out. But pulling out roots hurts. More than I thought it would. The day after the dinner, I opened Facebook and saw the pictures. Because of course there were pictures. Hannah in a silk dress, posing with her parents, her brother, my mom, my uncles. At the center of every frame, like she was a bride. My chair, if there ever was one, wasn't even empty. It was filled by Riley's new girlfriend. A girl he'd started dating literally 2 weeks ago. She had a name card, a custom menu, a caption under a photo that read, "Family means everything." I wish I could say I felt rage, that I smashed something, or at least unfriended them all in a dramatic sweep. But I didn't. I just closed the app, turned off my phone, and sat in silence on the edge of the bed while Eliza brushed her hair in the mirror. After a minute, she glanced at me. "You okay?" I didn't know how to answer that. "I'm fine," I said like a reflex. She nodded, then added, "You know, fine isn't a finish line." And that cracked something open in me. Because she was right. For years, I treated fine like some kind of success. Like if I could just make it through the event without saying the wrong thing, or getting too upset, or being seen as a burden, that meant I was winning. That I was somehow doing life right. But fine was killing me. Slowly, quietly, like a leak under the floorboards you don't notice until your whole foundation rots. So the next morning, I got up early, showered, shaved, wrote down 3 things I'd been putting off for months. None of them were major life changes. Just small stuff. Sign up for the photography class I'd bookmarked a year ago, call the gym near my apartment, and finally fix the leaky kitchen tap that made that weird plink noise every 5 seconds. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was the first brick in the wall I needed to build between me and them. That week, I went to the gym twice. Just walking in felt surreal. I hadn't worked out consistently since college. I told the guy at the front desk I was looking to build a routine, and he set me up with a trainer named Marcus who looked like he could bench press a truck but talked like a chill camp counselor. "Don't try to be a hero," he said. "Start with what you can do consistently. Discipline over ego." That line stuck with me. After the 3rd session, I started sleeping better. My shoulders ached in that good way. The kitchen tap stopped leaking after I finally pulled out the wrench I didn't know I even owned. And the photography class? It turned out to be the best decision I'd made in years. It was a small group, 8 people total, meeting every Saturday morning in this converted warehouse with natural lighting and endless coffee. I didn't know what I was doing, not really, but I liked the way holding the camera felt. Like I was framing the world on my own terms. Like I could focus on one thing and block everything else out. The instructor, Lyle, was this older guy with messy hair and the kind of voice you'd hear on a nature documentary. He didn't coddle anyone. He just gave real feedback. But after our second assignment, he paused while looking at one of my prints. "You've got a good eye," he said. And something about the way he said it, simple, honest, without any expectation behind it, nearly broke me. Because it was probably the first time in a long time that someone saw me for me, and not just for where I fit, or didn't, in a family photo. I started going early, staying late, volunteering to help set up. I wasn't trying to become some world-class artist or anything. I just liked the rhythm of it. The quiet satisfaction of capturing something real. One morning, after class, Eliza and I went for coffee. She asked if I was planning to share some of my work online. I hesitated, then said maybe. That night, she helped me set up a simple portfolio page. I uploaded a few of my favorites, some shots of downtown at sunset, one candid of a street musician lost in his song, and a photo of Eliza laughing while holding a coffee cup with whipped cream on her nose. The next day, I got my first message through the site. It was a local magazine asking if they could license one of my photos for a Faces of the City series. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I wasn't fine. I was starting to live. But the thing about rising? People notice. Especially the ones who liked you better when you were small. It started with a text from my mom. "Saw your photos. So proud of you." Then another. "Hannah's thinking of doing a shoot for her fashion blog. Maybe you two can collaborate." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because, for the first time in a long time, I had the power to choose whether or not to. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I forwarded the message to Eliza with a simple caption, "What do you think?" She replied almost instantly, "You already know." And I did. A week passed. Then 2. More emails came in, small offers, opportunities to shoot portraits or events. I wasn't quitting my job or anything, but I started carving out real time for it. People were paying me for something I created. Not because I was family, not because they were doing me a favor, but because I was good. And still, the messages from my mom trickled in. Your uncle's turning 60 next month. Family dinner, you're invited. You can bring Eliza. Followed by, it would mean a lot to everyone if you came. And finally, please don't shut us out. That one hit different. Because she wasn't just asking me to come anymore. She was asking me to forget. To forget the head table, the smirk, the jokes, the invisible name cards, the way they all laughed behind my back and then asked for my presence like I owed them something. But I wasn't interested in forgetting. I was interested in remembering, so I'd never let it happen again. Eliza and I talked about it. Not just once, but a few times. I didn't want to drag her through more of their mess. But she said something that stuck with me. You don't have to burn the bridge, but you don't have to walk across it either. So I didn't. I sent a polite, short message declining the invitation. Wished my uncle a happy birthday. Said we had other plans. And you know what? The world didn't end. No one showed up at my door demanding an explanation. No angry phone calls. Just silence. But it wasn't empty this time. It was peaceful. By mid-fall, I had a rhythm. Photography gigs every few weekends. Gym sessions twice a week. Weekly date nights with Eliza. I even started journaling, not the deep, emotional kind, but just quick thoughts at the end of the day. What I was grateful for. What I wanted more of. What I was learning about myself. And somewhere in the middle of all that, something clicked. I wasn't building a new version of myself. I was uncovering the version that had always been there. The one that wasn't scared of being seen. The one who didn't need permission to feel worthy. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't still think about them. About Hannah and Riley and my mom. About all the years I spent shrinking myself just to fit in their frame. About all the birthdays and dinners and texts that said, we're family, but felt more like, stay in your lane. And the more I thought about it, the more one thing became clear. They hadn't just disrespected me. They'd underestimated me. They thought I'd always stay quiet. Always come when called. Always swallow the insult and smile through it. But they were wrong. Looking back, I think part of me always hoped I'd get a clean break. That once I started building something for myself, outside of the family, outside of the years of small humiliations and fake smiles, I'd finally feel free. But healing doesn't work like that. Especially when the very people you're healing from start knocking again, not because they miss you, but because they've realized you're useful now. It started with another text from my mom. Do you still do photography? Hannah needs some headshots for her new website. Would be a nice way to reconnect. That word, reconnect, like there'd been a misunderstanding. Like I hadn't been excluded, mocked, and dismissed to my face. Just a little hiccup in our otherwise functional family dynamic. I didn't answer. The next day, I got a call from Aunt May. I let it ring. Then a message came in. We've always supported you. I think it would be really healing for the whole family if you helped Hannah with this. She's under a lot of pressure, and she needs someone she can trust. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then finally, I opened a blank document and started typing. Not a reply, just thoughts, feelings, everything I'd swallowed for years. I wrote about the head table, the comments, the way Eliza had been treated. I wrote about growing up in a family that only saw me when it was convenient, and how being quiet wasn't the same as being weak. It turned into 5 pages. At some point, Eliza walked in and saw me at my laptop. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I think I'm writing my manifesto. She smiled, but there was a seriousness in her eyes. What for? And I told her the truth. For me. And maybe for them. Eventually. Because I knew something now. They hadn't just dismissed me. They'd trained me. Trained me to believe I had to earn love. That attention was a reward for compliance. That the best I could hope for was tolerance. But they'd made a mistake. They gave me time to grow without them. And I'd used that time well. In October, I got my first corporate gig, a headshot session for a local startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and came with a referral to their event coordinator. 2 weeks later, I was booked for their company retreat. My photos ended up on their website, and just like that, I was being seen by more people than ever before. I upgraded my camera, invested in better lighting, took a business course on weekends just to understand contracts and pricing. And slowly, something started shifting. I wasn't just building a hobby. I was building leverage. Because now, when people typed local photographer into Google for our area, my name showed up first. My Instagram following grew. Clients started tagging me. And one day, I opened my inbox to find a message from, of all people, Brandon. Hey man, Hannah said you do photography. We're working on a brand launch. Could use some aesthetic shots. Hit me up. No greeting. No context. No acknowledgement of anything that happened. Just a casual expectation that I'd show up and work like a loyal cousin. That's when it hit me. They hadn't changed. But I had. And I was going to use that. Not to scream. Not to lash out. Not to finally deliver the emotional monologue I'd rehearsed in the shower. No. This time, I'd play their game. Only better. The first step was simple. I replied to Brandon. Hey, sounds cool. Happy to chat. Send me some details about the project. He wrote back fast. Said Hannah was launching a lifestyle blog and wanted curated photos, studio shots, candids, maybe some staged influencer content. She had a vision board, a color palette, even a mood playlist. It was all very Hannah. They didn't ask for my rates or my availability. They assumed I'd do it for free. So I sent over a PDF portfolio, along with a short professional message and my standard pricing sheet. There was a pause. 3 days went by. Then I got a text from my mom. Is there any way you could help them out? Hannah's trying to get this off the ground. It's not about money. I didn't reply. Instead, I waited. 2 more days passed, and Brandon messaged again. We're on a budget right now, but happy to give you exposure. Hannah's got a decent following. Could be good for you. Exposure. That magic word they always pull out when they don't want to pay you. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a photo shoot. This was the perfect setup. I created a new service package that night. Called it the Vanity Package. I didn't name it after Hannah, of course, but I built it with her in mind. Full day shoot. Outfit changes. Color consultation. Branding assistance. Candid and posed edits. Rush delivery. It was expensive and worth every penny. I uploaded it to my website, gave it a clean design, and boosted it on Instagram. I used some of my previous influencer-style shoots to showcase the layout. It looked professional, sharp, and luxurious. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 inquiries from actual content creators. And then, just as I'd hoped, Hannah messaged me directly. Hey, so I saw the Vanity Package. That's kind of what I had in mind. Is there a family discount or something? I took a deep breath, then responded. Hey, I'd love to work with you, but this package requires a lot of time and planning. Because it's you, I'm happy to waive the rush fee. Everything else remains the same. She replied almost instantly. Seriously? No other family would charge me full price. You're right, I said. But no other family treated me like I wasn't one of them. She didn't answer after that. But I wasn't done. At the next photography class, I pulled Lyle aside. Told him I was thinking about doing a gallery. Nothing huge. Just a collection of photos about identity. How people see themselves versus how the world sees them. He loved the idea. So I started gathering material. Some portraits were dramatic. Some subtle. I interviewed the subjects. Got quotes. Paired the images with short captions. I worked nights and weekends. Designed the layout myself. Booked a space. Nothing fancy, just a local art co-op that hosted small exhibitions. I called it Blurred Lines. And one of the centerpiece photos? A candid shot of Eliza. Sitting at a table near the bar, a plate in front of her, blurry laughter in the background as she looked directly at the camera. Unnoticed. Out of focus, yet quietly composed. The caption underneath? We're not part of that group. They are. I didn't invite my family to the opening. I invited everyone else. My clients. My photography peers. Eliza's friends. People I'd met at shoots. Strangers who followed my work online. The gallery was packed. And halfway through the night, as I was speaking with a local journalist doing a small write-up, I saw them. Hannah, Aunt May, my mom, standing at the back, looking around like they didn't quite belong. For once, they didn't. They weren't the center of attention. They weren't the stars of the show. They were just guests. And I was the one holding the camera. They came up to me after the talk. My mom hugged me too tight. Aunt May said, "This is amazing, Peter. You've really surprised us." And Hannah? She stared at the photo of Eliza for a long time, then said, "Is that from the banquet?" I nodded. Yeah, I was practicing composition that night. Caught that by accident. She gave a short laugh. Well, you've got talent. Maybe we can still work together sometime. I smiled. Maybe, but we both knew we wouldn't. The gallery show ran for 3 weeks. Each night it was open, someone new stopped me to tell me how much the photos meant to them, how they saw themselves in the people I'd captured. Some cried. Others just stood quietly in front of the portraits, reading the quotes. then glancing back at me with something deeper than praise. Recognition. Respect. I wasn't just Peter, the quiet cousin who hovered near the bar. I was the artist, the storyteller. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking to fit a frame someone else had made. The write-up from the journalist came out the following week. It was a full-page piece titled "The Man Behind the Blur, Finding Clarity Through the Lens." It touched on my work, my journey, and the message behind blurred lines, about reclaiming your voice, your identity, even when the people closest to you try to erase it. They didn't name names, but anyone in my family who read it knew exactly who it was about. That's when the fallout really began. It started small. A cold text from Aunt May. Saw the article. You really think airing private family matters is appropriate? I didn't respond. Then came the Facebook post. Hannah, ever the master of passive aggression, wrote a long, performative caption beneath a photo of her and Riley at brunch. It read, "Some people can only feel important by tearing others down. But those of us who know who we are don't need to retaliate. We just keep rising nail polish sparkles #unbothered #family is forever." The comments were a mess of sympathy and curiosity, with a few distant relatives chiming in things like, "You go, girl," and "Ignore the haters." I didn't say a word. I didn't like the post. I didn't watch the stories. I simply waited. Because the thing about revenge, real revenge, is that it doesn't come from chaos. It comes from silence. And mine was loud enough now to echo. 3 weeks later, I got an email from a regional creative agency. They were working on a tourism campaign for our city and had seen blurred lines featured in the local arts newsletter. They wanted me to lead the photography for the entire project: portraits, landscapes, candid street shots. A full feature. It paid more than I'd ever made from photography before. I signed the contract 2 days later. I also hired an assistant. Eliza. She'd left her job 2 months prior, frustrated by corporate politics and burned out from being dismissed in meetings. We'd joked about working together before, but now? Now it was real. She had an eye for people and a sharper mind for planning than I ever would. Together, we mapped out routes, tracked lighting schedules, scheduled shoots with local business owners and artists. And then, because life has a twisted sense of humor, I got a DM from Hannah. "Hey, so Brandon and I are launching a boutique brand, and we really want to shoot a campaign. I know we didn't connect before, but we're ready to move forward professionally. What's your availability?" It was like she thought nothing had happened. Like the months of silence, the insults, the shade, the fake smiles at the gallery. None of it mattered now that I was someone she needed. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that one too. Then I clicked over to my website, created a brand new landing page called Red Flag Clients, and wrote a list of polite red flags. People who want to pay an exposure. People who dismiss previous behavior as just family stuff. People who only reach out after you've succeeded. Then I screenshotted it and sent it to her with a single message. "Thanks for thinking of me. I'm fully booked this year." She didn't reply. 2 days later, my mom called. I didn't pick up. Then she texted, "I don't recognize you anymore. You've changed." And that's when I realized she was right. I had changed. I'd stopped apologizing for being different. I'd stopped playing the part they'd written for me. I'd stopped needing their approval. And in doing so, I'd become someone they couldn't control anymore. The final piece of revenge wasn't a single moment. It was a slow, steady reckoning. My uncle tried to hire me to shoot his company's end-of-year event. I quoted him my full rate. He balked. I stood firm. He ended up going with someone else. The photos were fine, but they weren't mine. Riley's girlfriend reached out through her brand's email, asking if I'd be open to a collab shoot. I replied professionally, thanked her, and declined. Then I blocked her on Instagram. A family friend ran into Eliza at the farmer's market and asked, "Is Peter mad at everyone or something?" She just smiled and said, "No, he's just done pretending." Word got around. At the next major family gathering, some cousin's engagement party, I wasn't invited. Eliza and I went hiking instead. Took some incredible shots of the sunset bleeding across the valley. I posted one later that night with a caption that simply read, "Sometimes the best view comes after the biggest climb." It blew up. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. Among them, one from a verified lifestyle influencer with over 1 million followers. "Obsessed with your work. Demanding you now, let's collaborate." That one job turned into 4, then into a feature, then into something bigger. And all the while, My family watched from the sidelines, still trying to figure out how I'd gone from the +1 at the bar to the man everyone wanted to sit next to. The truth? I hadn't changed who I was. I'd just stopped letting them define it. A few months later, Eliza and I hosted our own little dinner party. Nothing fancy, just a backyard barbecue with friends, some clients who had become close, a couple neighbors. The kind of gathering that feels like home, even if no one shares your last name. I stepped out onto the porch with a drink in hand and watched the string lights dance above the table. People were laughing. Music was playing. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not borrowed. Not conditional. Not held together by guilt or obligation. Real. And as I stood there, Eliza walked up beside me, slid her hand into mine, and whispered, "They're watching, you know." I looked at her, puzzled. She nodded toward her phone on the table. "Hannah viewed my story. Twice. So did your mom." I laughed, then raised my glass and whispered back, "Let them. Because they needed to see it. Not out of spite. Not out of cruelty. But because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were never broken to begin with. You were just surrounded by people who didn't know how to love what they couldn't control. And now? Now they'd have to watch from a distance. Because I wasn't their +1 anymore. I was the main event. I didn't realize a single sentence could rearrange how you see your entire family. But that's exactly what happened at a backyard barbecue on a Sunday afternoon, with the smell of overcooked burgers in the air and everyone pretending we were one big happy unit. My name's Timothy. I'm 27. And until that day, I still thought, stupidly, that if I worked hard enough, kept my head down long enough, and stayed patient enough, things would eventually even out. They never do. They just get clearer. It was one of those family BBQs that looked perfect from the outside. My parents' place has this wide backyard with a worn wooden deck, a grill my dad treats better than most people, and a garage that's basically an extension of his personality. Tools on every wall, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and a long list of projects that never seemed to end. My sister, Rachel, was there with her fiancé, sitting comfortably on the patio furniture, laughing, sipping drinks, doing absolutely nothing. That was normal. Rachel never lifted a finger at these things. She didn't have to. I showed up like I always do. On time, empty-handed because my mom had already told me to just come and help out, which is family code for free labor. I parked, grabbed my keys, and before I even reached the back gate, I could already hear my dad's voice carrying across the yard. Loud, confident, in charge. He liked having an audience. Everything was fine at first. Small talk, fake smiles. My mom hovering, making sure Rachel had enough to eat while telling me I looked tired and asking if I was still doing that job. Same job I've been doing for 3 years. Same job that pays my bills. Same job they barely acknowledge unless they need something. At some point, the conversation drifted to weddings. Rachel's wedding, of course. Her venue, her dress, her future. My dad was holding court, telling relatives how proud he was, how she deserved a smooth path after everything. I didn't know what everything meant, since she'd never struggled a day in her life, but no one questioned it. They never do. Then someone, an uncle, I think, joked about how I was the responsible one, how I'd always been the worker. That's when my dad laughed. Not a small laugh. A big one. The kind where he leans back, beer in hand, like he's about to deliver wisdom. He looked straight at me and said, "Well, Timothy's built to struggle so his sister doesn't have to." Everyone chuckled. Not hard. Not nervously. Comfortably. I remember blinking, like my brain needed a second to catch up. I actually smiled at first, because that's what I always do. Then I asked calmly, "Is that a joke?" My dad didn't miss a beat. He pointed his thumb toward the garage, still smiling, and said, "There's work waiting." Something in my chest tightened. Not anger right away. Just this dull, sinking confirmation. Like a quiet voice saying, "See? This is it. This is how they see you." I nodded. That's what I did. I nodded, took my keys out of my pocket, and walked toward the garage while everyone went back to talking about seating arrangements and flower colors. No one followed. No one asked if I was okay. They never do. Inside that garage, surrounded by dusty boxes and half-finished projects, I started replaying moments I'd ignored for years. Being woken up early on weekends to help your father while Rachel slept in. Being told I couldn't afford college help because we had to think about your sister's future. Being expected to loan money, fix cars, move furniture, show up, always show up, while my needs were treated like inconveniences. I told myself I was just being dramatic. I always did. Families joke, right? Parents say things they don't mean. Except my dad didn't sound like he was joking. He sounded proud, like he'd solved some equation where my effort equaled her comfort. As I sorted through boxes, sweat dripping down my back, I could hear laughter outside. Rachel's laugh especially. Light, carefree, untouched. And I realized something that made my hands shake, not with rage, but with clarity. This wasn't a one-time comment. It was a philosophy, one they'd been living by for years. When I finally walked back out, grease on my hands and dirt on my shirt, my dad glanced over and said, "Good. While you're at it, we've got some shelves that need fixing next week. You'll come by, right?" He didn't ask. He never asks. I opened my mouth to answer, and for the first time in my life, I didn't immediately know what to say. Because something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I could feel it settling into place, like the first click of a lock turning. I didn't answer my dad right away. That alone felt like a small act of rebellion. Just standing there, silent, while he waited for my automatic, "Yeah, sure." He frowned, like my hesitation was a software glitch he didn't expect. Then my mom jumped in, smoothing it over, saying something like, "We'll talk about it later," which really meant, Timothy will cave later. I always did. I drove home that evening with my windows down, letting the noise of the road drown out my thoughts, but it didn't work. That sentence kept looping in my head. Built to struggle so your sister doesn't have to. It wasn't just cruel. It was efficient. It explained everything too neatly. And once you see a pattern like that, you can't unsee it. The next few weeks made sure of that. Rachel started calling more. Not to ask how I was, not to check in, but to delegate. Could I help move some things from her apartment? Could I come by and look at her fiancé's car? Could I front a little money for a deposit because it's just temporary? Every request came wrapped in that same tone. Casual, entitled, confident I'd say yes. And every time, my parents backed her up before I even responded. "You know how much pressure she's under," my mom would say. "You're good at this stuff," my dad would add. What they never said was, "Are you okay with this?" Or "Do you have time?" Or "We appreciate you." I started noticing the small things more. Like how my dad would lecture me about saving money while simultaneously bragging about helping Rachel with wedding expenses. Or how my mom would remind me that I was almost 30 and should be more established, then turn around and excuse Rachel's spending because she was starting a new chapter. Every conversation felt tilted, like the floor slanted just enough that I was always sliding downhill. The real pressure point came about a month later, when my dad called me on a Tuesday afternoon and told me to come by that evening. Not asked, told. I already knew what it was about. Rachel and her fiancé were buying a house. A big one. Bigger than anything they could realistically afford on their own. I showed up anyway, because some part of me still hoped I was wrong. They were all seated at the kitchen table when I walked in. Papers spread out. Serious faces. My dad gestured for me to sit like this was a business meeting, which should have been my first clue to leave. "We just need to talk through a few things," he said. Rachel didn't look at me. She was scrolling on her phone. My dad explained it carefully, like he was being reasonable. They needed help with the down payment. Not a gift, of course. Just support. Something to get them started. He said it like it was obvious that I'd be the one to provide it. I asked how much. The number hit me like a physical shove. It was more than I had saved. More than I could comfortably lose. When I hesitated, my mom sighed dramatically and said, "Timothy, this is family." I asked what would happen if I said no. The room went quiet. Rachel finally looked up, annoyed, like I'd broken the script. My dad leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Then we'd have to rethink some things," he said. "What things?" I asked. He glanced at my mom, then back at me. "Well, you're still living in that apartment we helped you find. And you know, we've always assumed you'd be here for us. For the family." There it was. The unspoken contract. My compliance in exchange for belonging. I left without agreeing to anything. That alone felt dangerous. The call started the next day. Subtle guilt at first. Then sharper. Rachel accused me of not supporting her future. My mom cried on the phone about how disappointed she was. My dad reminded me of everything he'd done for me, tallying up years of basic parenting like debts I owed interest on. Then came the betrayal. I found out by accident. A letter from the bank showed up at my apartment, addressed to my parents, with a notice about a loan I didn't recognize. My name was on it, as a co-signer. I read it 3 times before it sank in. They hadn't asked me. They hadn't told me. They had used my information I'd trusted them with years ago, to secure part of Rachel's loan. I sat on my couch staring at that letter, my hands numb, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I confronted them, my dad didn't even deny it. "We knew you'd overthink it," he said. This was easier. Easier. Like my life was a shortcut. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, and said, "You'll be fine. You always are." That was the moment something inside me finally broke. Not explosively, quietly, cleanly. The last illusion I had, that they saw me as a person, not a resource, collapsed. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just said, "You had no right." My dad's response chilled me. "We're your parents." Of course we did. I walked out after that, but this time, it wasn't confusion or hurt that followed me. It was resolve, because they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. And they didn't even realize what they'd just done. That letter, that loan, that casual theft of my trust, that was the breaking point. And while they were celebrating their smooth path forward, I was already starting to think about what came next. I didn't know exactly how it would play out yet, but for the first time in my life, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't built to struggle for them anymore. After I walked out that night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for almost an hour, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed nonstop on the passenger seat. Missed calls, texts, messages that bounced between anger and guilt so fast it was dizzying. I didn't open any of them. I already knew what they said. I'd heard versions of those words my entire life. The thing that surprised me most wasn't how angry I was. It was how tired I felt. Deep tired. The kind that doesn't go away with sleep. The kind that comes from realizing you've been carrying something heavy for years and no one ever planned to help you put it down. The fallout hit fast. Faster than I expected. Within a week, my dad called to tell me the bank had questions. Apparently, my hesitation had made things complicated. He said it like I'd intentionally caused trouble. When I reminded him that I never agreed to co-sign anything, he went quiet for a moment before saying, "Let's not rewrite history." That sentence stuck with me, because rewriting history was exactly what they were doing. I contacted the bank myself. It wasn't dramatic. Just careful questions. Calm explanations. I learned more in one phone call than my parents ever intended me to know. My name wasn't just casually attached. It was essential. Without me, the loan didn't hold together the way they needed it to. That explained the pressure, the sudden urgency, the entitlement disguised as family concern. When I told my parents I was looking into my options, everything changed. The tone shifted from disappointed to hostile. My mom accused me of threatening Rachel's future. My dad accused me of being selfish. Rachel sent a long message about loyalty and sacrifice, ending it with, "I thought you were stronger than this." That one almost worked. Almost. But something about it felt hollow. Manipulative. Like strength, to them, meant silence. Then came the practical consequences. My dad stopped answering my calls unless it was about the loan. My mom stopped checking in altogether. When I showed up one afternoon to pick up a box of things I'd left in their garage years ago, my dad stood in the doorway and said, "This isn't a good time." I realized, standing there, that access to my own family had always been conditional. As long as I was useful, I belonged. Losing that illusion hurt more than I expected. The stress started to seep into everything. I couldn't sleep. I replayed conversations in my head at night, imagining better responses, firmer boundaries, things I wished I'd said years ago. My work suffered. I missed deadlines. I started dreading my phone. Every unknown number made my chest tighten. I felt like I was bracing for impact all the time. Rock bottom isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's sitting alone in your apartment, surrounded by the life you built on scraps of approval, wondering how much of it was actually yours. There was a week where I barely left my place. I ate poorly. I ignored messages from friends because I didn't know how to explain what was happening without sounding bitter or pathetic. I told myself I was fine, but I wasn't. I felt stripped down to nothing but obligation and resentment. What changed wasn't a single big moment. It was small, almost boring. One morning, I woke up and realized no one had called me in 3 days. No demands, no guilt, no instructions, just silence. And instead of panicking, I felt something close to relief. That scared me at first. Then it intrigued me. I started doing things differently. Not dramatically, just deliberately. I pulled out every document I had, bank statements, old emails, anything tied to my finances. I made a list of what was actually mine and what I'd let them touch over the years. It wasn't pretty. There were lines blurred everywhere. Accounts I'd opened for convenience. Information I'd shared because I trusted them. That trust had cost me more than money. I called a financial advisor recommended by a coworker. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. Sitting in that office, explaining my situation to someone who had no emotional investment in my family was grounding. He didn't judge me. He didn't minimize it. He just laid out facts and options. For the first time, I felt like I had a map instead of a mess. Around the same time, I started picking up extra work. Freelance projects I'd always turned down because I was too busy helping family. Funny how much time appeared when no one was calling you to move furniture or fix things for free. The work was exhausting, but it was mine. Every dollar felt different when it wasn't already promised to someone else. I also started therapy. That was harder to admit, even to myself. The first few sessions were mostly me venting, recounting moments I'd normalized for years. The therapist didn't interrupt much, just listened. Occasionally asked questions that landed uncomfortably close to the truth. Like why I equated being needed with being loved, or why I felt guilty for wanting peace. Those questions followed me home. Slowly, something shifted. I stopped answering calls immediately. I stopped explaining myself in long paragraphs. I stopped volunteering information. It felt awkward at first, like learning a new language late in life. But with each small boundary, I felt steadier, more solid. Financially, things improved faster than I expected. Not because I suddenly made a fortune, but because I stopped bleeding resources. I wasn't covering emergencies that weren't mine. I wasn't fixing problems that had nothing to do with me. I started saving intentionally, for myself. That felt radical. Emotionally, the progress was uneven. Some days I felt strong. Other days, I missed them. Even now, writing this, I won't pretend I didn't love my family. I did. That's what made it hurt. That's what made it real. Walking away from people who hurt you isn't clean or heroic. It's messy. It's lonely. It's necessary. Rachel reached out a few times during this period. The messages were shorter, sharper. She wanted updates. She wanted reassurance. She wanted me back in my old role. When I didn't give it, her tone turned cold. At one point, she wrote, "I don't even recognize you anymore." I almost replied, "Neither do I." But I didn't send anything. The real turning point came quietly, late one night, while I was reviewing a contract for a side project. I realized I wasn't anxious. Not about them. Not about money. Not about what came next. For the first time in months, my mind was focused on my own future instead of managing someone else's expectations. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a fall. It was a reset. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't healed. But I was rebuilding. On my terms. Brick by brick. And the more stable I became, the more nervous my family seemed to get. Because when you stop playing your assigned role, it doesn't just change you. It destabilizes the entire system that depended on you staying small. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of politeness. After months of cold messages, guilt-tripping, and thinly veiled accusations, my dad called me one evening and sounded reasonable. Calm. Almost warm. He asked how I was doing. He said he hoped work was going well. He even said, "We miss you." Like it was a normal thing to say and not a strategic move. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People like my father don't change overnight. They pivot when pressure builds. And something, somewhere, was applying pressure. I didn't confront him. I didn't challenge the tone shift. I matched it. I gave short, polite answers. Non-committal ones. The kind that reveal nothing. When he suggested we all reset and have dinner together soon, I said, "We'll see." That phrase used to drive him crazy. Now it felt powerful. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became clearer. Rachel messaged me more often, but her words were carefully chosen. Less accusation, more nostalgia. She talked about growing up together, about how stressful wedding planning had become, about how much she wished things were simple again. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge what they'd done. That wasn't an oversight. It was a tactic. Meanwhile, I kept building quietly. The side projects turned into something steadier. One contract led to another. A client recommended me to someone else. Suddenly, I wasn't scrambling anymore. I wasn't rich, but I was secure. More importantly, I was invisible to them in the ways that mattered. They had no idea how my finances looked now. No idea what I was capable of doing without them. That anonymity became my advantage. Through a coworker, I got connected to a lawyer, not for a dramatic lawsuit or confrontation, just for information. Someone who could explain my position without emotion attached. I laid everything out. The co-signed loan, the use of my personal information, the pressure, the messages, the timeline. He listened carefully, then asked me a question that stopped me cold. Did you ever give written consent? I hadn't. That conversation changed how I thought about everything. Not because I suddenly wanted to burn bridges, but because I realized I'd been operating from guilt while they'd been operating from assumption. They assumed I'd never push back. Assumed I'd never look too closely. Assumed I'd always prioritize family harmony over my own security. They were wrong. I didn't act immediately. That part is important. Revenge, real revenge, isn't impulsive. It's patient. It waits until the other side is comfortable again. And they were getting comfortable. Rachel invited me to see the house. The house my name was tied to. She framed it like an olive branch. Like she wanted my blessing. I said I couldn't make it, but wished her well. That response clearly unsettled her. She tried again a week later, this time mentioning how hard things had been financially. How the loan terms were tight. How they were under pressure to keep everything stable. There it was. The crack. My dad followed up with another call, this one more direct. He said the bank was doing routine reviews. He said it would help if I could just reassure them. He said it casually, like asking me to pass the salt. I asked him what would happen if I didn't. There was a pause, just a fraction too long. Well, he said carefully, that would complicate things for everyone. Everyone. Not me. Never me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing things down. Dates, conversations, messages, amounts. Not because I planned to storm in waving evidence, but because I wanted clarity. I wanted control over the narrative they'd been rewriting for years. I also started reconnecting with people they'd quietly pushed out of my life. An aunt who'd always seen through my parents' favoritism. A cousin who distanced himself after a similar family obligation situation years ago. I didn't frame it as gossip. I asked questions. Listened. Patterns emerged. Stories lined up too neatly to be coincidence. Apparently, I wasn't the first one they'd leaned on until the structure buckled. The more I learned, the calmer I became. Anger fades when understanding replaces confusion. What remained wasn't rage, it was resolve. Rachel's wedding date got closer. Stress mounted. Family group chats revived. Suddenly, I was included again. Tagged in messages. Asked for opinions. It was almost impressive how quickly I was reabsorbed once they needed stability. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just expectation. My mom finally reached out directly. Her message was softer than the others. She talked about regret. About wanting peace. About how families shouldn't be divided over money. That last part made me smile. Because money hadn't divided us. Entitlement had. I told her I wanted peace too. I meant it. Just not the kind that required my silence. Behind the scenes, I made preparations. I updated documents. Changed access. Closed loopholes I hadn't even known existed. Every step was quiet. Legal. Methodical. The kind of work no one notices until it's too late to undo. The final piece fell into place when the bank sent another notice. This one wasn't alarming on its own. Routine language. Compliance review. But I recognized the timing. Reviews like that don't happen randomly. They happen when numbers get tight. When risk shifts. That's when I realized the truth. They weren't just asking for reassurance. They were counting on it. Their entire plan assumed my continued cooperation. And I had stopped cooperating months ago. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let the invitations continue. Let the tension build. Let them believe they were pulling me back into orbit. Because the higher they stacked their expectations, the harder the fall would be. The opportunity was coming. I could feel it. A moment where they'd need me publicly. Where they'd assume compliance in front of others. Where backing out wouldn't just inconvenience them, it would expose them. I wasn't planning to yell, or shame, or make a scene. I was planning to step aside at exactly the right moment and let gravity do the rest. The moment arrived on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks before Rachel's wedding. I knew it was coming because my phone rang at 8:12 a.m., and my dad never called that early unless something was wrong. When I answered, his voice had a tight edge to it, controlled but strained, like he was trying not to show his hand. "Timothy," he said, skipping every formality. We need to talk. Today. I told him I was busy and asked what it was about. He exhaled slowly. The bank. There it was. Apparently, the routine review had turned into a deeper audit. Apparently, someone at the bank had noticed discrepancies. Apparently, they needed confirmation, written confirmation, that I was fully aware of and agreeable to my role in the loan. Not later. Not eventually. Now. He didn't ask me to help. He assumed I would. We'll come by this afternoon, he said. Your mother and Rachel too. It's better if we're all on the same page. I agreed. Calmly. Casually. I even suggested a time. That afternoon, they showed up together, like a united front. My parents sat on my couch. Rachel hovered nearby, arms folded, jaw tight. The energy in the room was thick, heavy with expectation. They spoke quickly, overlapping, explaining how stressful everything had become, how close the wedding was, how important stability was right now. They talked for a long time. I let them. When they finally paused, my dad leaned forward and said, "So we just need you to sign the confirmation. After that, everything settles." I looked at him and said, "I won't be signing anything." The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Rachel scoffed first. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes," I said. My mom's face crumpled. "Timothy, please don't do this." "Not now." "Do what?" I asked. "Refuse to lie." That's when my dad's tone changed. The warmth vanished. The patience evaporated. "You're being selfish," he said flatly. "After everything we've done for you." I stood up. Not dramatically, just deliberately. I walked to my desk, picked up a folder, and brought it back to the coffee table. I placed it between us and sat back down. "I've already spoken to the bank," I said. "And to a lawyer." My mom's eyes widened. Rachel stiffened. "You used my information without consent," I continued. "That loan only exists because you assumed I'd stay quiet." "I won't." My dad laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think you can just walk away from this?" "I already have," I said. Rachel's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to us?" I met her eyes. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" That was the first time she didn't have an answer. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The bank froze the loan pending investigation. The house deal collapsed. Deposits were forfeited. The wedding plans unraveled piece by piece as money dried up. Vendors demanded payments that never came. Excuses stopped working. My parents called constantly. When guilt failed, anger took over. When anger failed, desperation followed. They begged. They blamed. They accused me of tearing the family apart. But something unexpected happened too. Other relatives started calling. Quietly. Carefully. Asking questions. Apparently, the story my parents had been telling didn't hold up under scrutiny. Apparently, when pressure hit, the truth leaked out. I didn't need to defend myself. The facts did that for me. Rachel stopped speaking to me altogether. My parents told anyone who would listen that I was ungrateful, cold, heartless. I didn't correct them. People who mattered saw through it. People who didn't never really mattered anyway. Months passed. The investigation concluded. The bank removed my name entirely. No penalties. No obligations. Clean. Final. The lawyer shook my hand and said, "You did the right thing." I believed him. My parents downsized. Quietly. Their authority diminished along with their finances. The family gatherings grew smaller. Quieter. I wasn't invited anymore, and for the first time, that felt like freedom instead of punishment. Rachel's wedding happened eventually. Smaller. Later. I didn't attend. And me? I slept better. I worked harder. I laughed more. I stopped bracing myself for impact. I learned what peace felt like when it didn't require permission. The strangest part is this. I don't hate them. I don't even think about them much anymore. They taught me something valuable, even if they never intended to. I was never built to struggle so someone else could coast. I was built to walk away.